Since the end of last season, we have had 19 managerial changes in the Championship, and in today's video we're going to be ranking each of those managerial changes on whether they were an upgrade or a downgrade. We're going to be throwing them into the following tier list. They were either a big upgrade, a slight upgrade, you're in limbo with them, or it's a slight downgrade. Now of course we do have some Championship clubs who haven't changed managers in that time frame, so let's go ahead and throw them into the tier list first. And it is a little bit crazy looking into this one. We've only got 8 Championship clubs who haven't changed manager since the end of last season. We must be getting close towards a record in terms of the number of managerial changes that we've had already in the Championship this season. But the 8 clubs who have stuck with their managers have been Preston, Coventry, Millwall, Reading, Norwich, Swansea, Bristol City and Sheffield United. And that is where the list ends. The rest of these Championship clubs we're going to be ranking on whether or not they made an upgrade when they went ahead and changed managers. Obviously some of these managerial departures were, the club going ahead and sacking them, others were managers walking out on them, but we're going to be throwing them into the tier list anyway. We'll start out with the most recent managerial change, and I'm going to throw Wigan into limbo because I sort of made this category for the incoming managers who we either don't quite know what their level is, or there's not that much of a difference between the outgoing manager in terms of quality and the incoming manager. We got the news yesterday that Kolo Touré has been appointed as the new Wigan boss, and I'm a little bit conflicted on this one, if I'm honest. Wigan fans, I want to get your guys' view on this down in the comments below. Now it goes without saying that first of all I thought the sacking of Richardson in the first place was incredibly harsh. I get that they were on a bad run of form, but to part ways with him after everything he'd done for that club at the first real hurdle that he'd run into there, I think was a mistake and could still prove to be massively costly for Wigan come the end of the season. The appointment of Touré is an interesting one. Obviously he has built up his coaching CV through working with Brendan Rodgers at Celtic and then Leicester, but to throw a new manager with no first team managerial experience into the deep end, a club like Wigan who, let's not beat around the bush, are in a relegation battle this season, it's sink or swim for him, and I'm not quite sure how it's going to turn out. It's going to be fascinating to watch, but I'm not sure if Wigan have made a massive upgrade in that department, but time will tell on that one. We've got to give Touré his chance. So yeah, with Wigan, I'm in limbo. I'm also going to chuck QPR into limbo as of recording right now. They don't actually have a first team manager, obviously. Michael Beale making the controversial decision to go ahead and take the Rangers job, walking out of QPR. Only, not that long ago, obviously, he turned down the Wolves job, and I think that that's where a little bit of the hypocrisy comes from, and the reason that QPR fans are actually so sort of outraged about this one, because he'd sort of sold them that line of being committed to the club and the long-term project. He came out with that speech when he did turn down that Wolves job, to only then jump at the next hurdle. That's always going to leave a bad taste in fans' mouths. I get why the Rangers job would be really appealing to him, his history with the club there, how big of a club they actually are in stature and things like that, but all his words previously sort of mean nothing now, which is a shame. I'm going to put Liam Rossini into limbo as well. Obviously, Shotarov Alatse to Liam Rossini. Is that an upgrade? Is that a downgrade? We've not really seen a great deal in terms of him being a first-team manager up until this point. I think the Alatse departure was inevitable at one point, to be honest, given how much had been invested into this whole side and how they weren't seeing a return on that investment up until this point of the season. But he is a manager who I think we're gonna grow to really like. He speaks really well about the game, but it's just a really small sample size that we're working with, obviously, with a few games in at Hull and then that little stint he had as first team coach at Derby. Blackpool switching from Neil Critchley to Michael Appleton. I'm gonna have to throw this one into the slight downgrade category. I am a little bit, maybe kinda on Appleton than maybe some Blackpool fans are feeling at the moment, because I do get what he's trying to do there, and when Blackpool have got it right, they have looked, quite good and, cohesive. They can score quite a few goals. But working and coming into that sort of structure where that, lack of funds was always going to be apparent, you have to sort of work within your means. And I think that Appleton has run into quite a few hurdles a lot sooner along the line than someone like Critchley did, who was getting absolutely everything out of that Blackpool squad and were never really phased by relegation throughout his tenure at Blackpool, which is a real credit to Critchley. So not, that I'm making a huge knock on Appleton here, but I think this more speaks to Critchley's quality maybe than it does to Appleton's, to say that he is an obvious downgrade on him. But obviously Critchley jumped ship in the end to take that Villa job. Luton obviously going from Nathan Jones to Rob Edwards. I'm going to have to put it in the downgrade category, but I don't want to bash Rob Edwards because I do like him as a manager. But to go, for Luton to go anywhere, I think it was always going to have to be a downgrade, given everything Nathan Jones had done. The fact that he himself was moving on to a Premier League club, it was always going to be tough for Luton to go ahead and match that. And who knows, over these next few years, Rob Edwards might go ahead and take this Luton side to the next level. All the foundations are certainly in there that have been left by Nathan Jones, but such a good job that he's done with that club over the years. The act to follow him was always going to have a difficult job on their hands, as we saw previously when he last left, and with Graham Jones coming in and how he sort of struggled to adapt to life in the Championship. So yeah, I do like Rob Edwards. Obviously the Luton, the Watford history there makes that appointment all the more interesting as well, but this more speaks to the quality of Jones than it does Edwards, why I'm putting it in the downgrade, if that makes sense. Same goes for Matt Taylor in at Rotherham as well. Really, I'm going to have to put that in the slight downgrade category, but not because I don't like him as a manager, just because I really do rate Paul Warne. And once again, a lot of what I was just saying about Luton there also can be echoed to Paul Warne and the sort of imprint that he's left on that Rotherham side. And at the point in which he left, I think was quite a shock to everyone, really, considering that this was the most competitive that Rotherham have ever looked in the Championship, really, under his tenure. But obviously he decided to go ahead and take that Derby job in the end. But if Matt Taylor is the man to go ahead and keep this Rotherham side up, I mean, what an achievement that'll be. Obviously Sunderland went from Alex Neil to Tony Mowbray, and to be honest, I don't think there's a great deal between those managers. I'm going to put that one into limbo. If I had to be pushed on that one, for me personally, I'd say Alex Neil is a slightly better manager than Tony Mowbray, but I don't think there's a whole lot in it. Obviously they are quite different managers in terms of their approaches and everything like that, but overall, taking into consideration their records, I don't think there's a great deal in terms of the overall quality there between those two. So for that managerial change, I'm going to put it in limbo. Obviously I'm sure Sunderland fans still haven't forgiven Alex Neil. And speaking of Alex Neil, obviously Stoke went from Michael O'Neill to Alex Neil, all the Neils in at Stoke, and even despite the fact that he's not got off to a flyer of a start at Stoke, and I think that he's run into a lot more problems early on than he was probably expecting to, I do think they made an upgrade with that appointment. I do think Alex Neil is a better manager than Michael O'Neill. Obviously O'Neill got plenty of time in the job, over 150 games in at Stoke, and didn't really achieve all too much. Obviously got them stable, had them on that level footing in the Championship, but was never the right man to sort of kick them on from that point. Whereas I do feel as if, given the right time and resources, Alex Neil could be that man for Stoke. So managerial CVs taken into consideration, what Neil's done at this level before, I do still think that's an upgrade despite inconsistent start. Vincent Kompany coming in at Burnley. I'm going to put him into the big upgrade category, bearing in mind I'm not judging him against Sean Dyche, but technically speaking, I'm ranking him up against Mike Jackson, as obviously he was the man in charge, albeit in a temporary basis, towards the end of the season in the Premier League for Burnley, and to be honest, didn't even do that bad of a job. But Vincent Kompany coming in, I think, has completely transformed the overall look of that club, from the recruitment strategy to the style of play, the feeling around the club, how he's completely flipped everything on its head. Loads of praise to Vincent Kompany this season. If you'd seen yesterday's video, you'll have seen how spot on Burnley got their recruitment. We went ahead and ranked the top 20 Championship signings of the summer, and plenty of Burnley players were in that top category. But yeah, Mike Jackson to Vincent Kompany, that's a big upgrade. West Brom went from Steve Bruce to Carlos Corberán. I'm just going to put it in big upgrade. Anyone was going to be a big upgrade on Steve Bruce for me. It was absolutely baffling at the time that West Brom even gave him the job in the first place, and up until the point in which he was sacked this season had been an absolute disaster for West Brom. Don't get me wrong, I still think that Corberán himself has a point to prove in this job, and he will face some real tests in the second half of this season at West Brom, but coach for coach, I do think he's a massive upgrade on Steve Bruce and sort of the football that Baggies fans were being served up with earlier in the season. Middlesbrough made really quite an interesting change, went from Chris Wilder to Michael Carrick. Now, on their overall manager's CVs, you know, going from Wilder to Carrick, you'd probably, you know, maybe have it down as a slight downgrade, but then with Carrick's lack of experience, maybe you could say they're in limbo. But I've been so impressed with what I've seen from him so far. I'm actually maybe going to put it into slight upgrade. The only reason being is I'm judging Chris Wilder on the Chris Wilder of this season. I'm not really taking into consideration the Chris Wilder of years gone by that's, you know, a championship great and one of the best we've ever seen at this level, because the Chris Wilder that was at Middlesbrough this season was a bit of a grumpy, sort of tactically unflexible manager who nothing really seemed to be falling for. And given everything that Middlesbrough had at their disposal, the fact of, you know, they were massively underachieving under Wilder, and since Carrick has come in, it finally looks like a squad that might actually be playing to their potential. So maybe I've jumped the gun on that one a little bit, but based off what I've seen so far, I actually think that one may turn out to be a slight upgrade on Wilder, which is crazy considering how highly, you know, in regard I held Wilder at the start of the season. Watford going from Rob Edwards to Slaven Bilic, I'm going to have to say big upgrade. I do like Rob Edwards. I thought at the time his sacking was incredibly harsh by Watford, but, you know, such is the style that Watford do like to adopt. However, to go from, you know, a rookie at this level, you know, in Rob Edwards, to a manager as tried and tested and as successful as Slaven Bilic, I'm going to have to put that one down as a big upgrade. You know, previous managerial experience in the Premier League, knows how to get out of this league as well, which is the biggest thing from Watford's point of view. And don't get me wrong, it has been, you know, somewhat of a rocky start for him. You know, there have been some real highs and lows in what has been a short stint at Watford already, but if I had to back either manager to get them over the line, I think it will be Bilic. Blackburn went from Tony Mowbray to John Dole Thomason. I'm actually going to say this one's a slight upgrade. Nothing massively against Tony Mowbray here, but I definitely think it was the right time that Blackburn did part ways with him. Certainly didn't think they went about it in the right way in terms of, you know, not letting Mowbray know anything about the contract extension. It all seemed to be a little bit mistreated really with how he actually left the club. But in terms of what John Dole Thomason's been able to deliver so far, does seem like the manager who is perhaps capable of taking this Blackburn squad up another level. Now, don't get me wrong, we have been here with Mowbray's Blackburn sides in the past, you know, a brilliant first half of the season, then we just see them fall away in the second half. But this time around does seem to be something a little bit more cohesive about them, and maybe long-standing as well in terms of them being able to actually consistently, you know, withstand a promotion charge. So I'm going to go slight upgrade on that regard. Huddersfield went from Danny Schofield to Mark Fotheringham in terms of their managerial change for the season. Schofield just looked massively out of his depth, but I think we've seen Fotheringham so far running into a lot of similar issues, and obviously we're quite fresh into his tenure at Huddersfield as well. We've not got that much of a track record to previously lean on with him either. So for that managerial change, I'm going to put it in limbo. They are still, you know, one of, if not the favourites to go down at this point in time. So I'm going to put Huddersfield in limbo for making that change. Similar with Cardiff, actually. Obviously, it was quite strange circumstances. I still think that they got rid of Morrison. You know, with all the changes that went on in that squad over the summer, the fact that they parted ways with him still hints to me that something maybe went on there behind the scenes. But then went ahead and hired Hudson, who was, you know, similarly inexperienced as to when Morrison first got the job. So for that managerial change, gonna chuck it in limbo. Still quite surprised that he actually got the job in the end, if I'm honest. I don't think we've seen a great deal of change since Morrison's tenure there. But yeah, Cardiff have just been a little bit of a weird run club over the last few years, to be honest. Finally then, for Birmingham, they of course went from Lee Bowyer to John Eustace, and I'm going to put him into that slight upgrade category. Don't get me wrong, Bowyer obviously for a season and a half there, 2 seasons at Birmingham, kept them up in both seasons, but it does seem like Eustace so far at least, is the man to go ahead and progress Birmingham on from the stage where they were at under Bowyer, you know, in a relegation dogfight. Doesn't seem, as of recording right now, that could be the case for Birmingham this season. Looks like they'll be a lot more comfortable this time around, obviously. We are still quite fresh into his tenure as well, you know, not got a massive track record previously in England to go ahead and lean onto, but from what I've seen so far, I've really been quite impressed. But guys, there we have it. Those are my verdicts on the managerial changes that Championship clubs have made this season. Have you made an upgrade or a downgrade in terms of the actual quality of your manager coming in? Obviously, all of these are subjective, and I've tried my best to explain my reasoning behind all of these, but some of them are a lot closer to the other tier than others. But as always, if you did go on to enjoy it, make sure to leave a like, do stick around and subscribe for some regular Championship content, and I'll see you all in the next one.